There comes a moment in the life of those destined for something greater, when things begin to change, not abruptly, but like a tide that slowly washes away everything that isn't deeply rooted. Perhaps you felt that your relationships, those connections that once seemed essential, begin to fade. It's as if the pieces of the puzzle you built in your world start to come loose, one by one, leaving you with a void that you can't easily fill. This isolation, though confusing, is not a mistake. It's a design, a space created by the universe for you to reconnect with who you truly are. It's easy to resist this process. How could you not, when the relationships that once gave you stability now seem to disappear? You might wonder what you did wrong, why the love, the support, or the companionship you sought seem to be growing farther away. But here's the truth. This isolation is not a punishment nor a sign that something is broken inside you. It's a call, an invitation to stop and listen. Because in the silence of solitude, in the absence of external distractions, is where you can finally hear your own voice. Imagine you're in a room full of people, with conversations, laughter, and sounds competing for your attention. It's impossible to hear a whisper amidst all that noise. But when the room empties, when silence takes its place, that whisper, though faint, becomes clear. That whisper is your essence, your deepest truth. It's the part of you that's always been there but often buried beneath expectations, demands, and connections you've made in the outside world. This isolation doesn't pull you away from others. It brings you closer to yourself. Often, we seek answers from others to questions that only we can answer. We try to fill internal voids with the love and company of others, believing that it will complete us. But what we're seeking outside of ourselves cannot be found there, because it's not something that's missing. It's something we've forgotten. Isolation, though challenging, is the ground where that memory can be reborn. It's a space where you can reconnect with a wholeness that's always been within you. This process isn't easy because it requires you to look at parts of yourself that you may have avoided. In the noise and distraction of everyday life, it's easy to ignore what hurts, what's missing, what doesn't fit. But in isolation, you cannot escape it. That emptiness you feel is not the absence of something external. It's a reminder that there's something inside of you that needs to be recognized, embraced, and healed. And that work can only be done when you have the courage to be with yourself, without escaping, without looking for answers elsewhere. Maybe you feel that this isolation is unfair, that you shouldn't be alone, that you should be surrounded by love, support, and deep connections. But what if this space is exactly what you need to grow? What if this moment of solitude is a gift? An opportunity to rediscover who you are without the influences of others. The roots of a tree aren't strengthened on the surface. They dig deep into the darkness, where there's no light or company, because it's there that they find the sustenance that will allow them to hold everything that will grow afterward. The disconnection from others isn't rejection. It's a redirection. It's as if the universe is saying, stop, look inside you. Everything you need is here. In solitude, you don't find immediate answers, but you find the right questions. What part of yourself have you been ignoring? What do you need to release to move forward? What truly makes you feel alive and connected? Not with the outer world, but with yourself. This isolation is a sacred space, though it doesn't always feel like it. It's a sanctuary where you can strip away the masks you've worn, the expectations you've assumed, and the connections that no longer resonate with who you're meant to be. In this place, you can rediscover your essence, that unique spark that cannot be defined or limited by anything or anyone. When you find that spark, everything changes. Not because the outside world transforms, but because you do. It's natural to want to rush this process, to want to get out of isolation as soon as possible. But growth can't be forced. It's like a flower that can't bloom before its time. It needs the proper space and time to open. The same goes for you. This moment is not a punishment or a pause. It's a preparation. You're being called to something greater. And this isolation is the ground where you're planting the roots you'll need to sustain that growth. In this space, you begin to realize that you're not truly alone because, while the external connections may have faded, the connection with yourself, with your essence, with the universe, has never disappeared. It's in this space where you discover that true companionship doesn't come from others, but from your own presence. And that connection with yourself is a foundation on which all other authentic connections in your life will be built. Don't fear this process. Don't rush it. Allow yourself to be in this place. Even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's uncertain, because it's here where you find the clarity that can't be found anywhere else. It's here where you discover that the love, the wholeness, and the connection you've always sought outside yourself have always been inside you, waiting to be recognized. When the time comes, the right connections will come back to you. They won't be the same as before, because you won't be the same. There'll be connections that reflect your truth, your essence, your growth. But until then, the space is yours. It's a gift, an opportunity, a preparation. And when you look back, you'll realize that this isolation wasn't a detour. It was the path that led you to yourself. At times, the change that occurs within you is so deep that, although you can't see it, you feel that something inside of you is shifting. It's not a sudden movement, but like the slow sliding of tectonic plates, which, though invisible, has the power to completely alter the surface of your life. This change isn't just emotional or mental, it's energetic. It's a transformation that happens on levels you don't always understand, but manifests in ways that are impossible to ignore. If you feel that people around you seem not to understand you, if the relationships that once gave you meaning now seem heavy, it's because the energy you're carrying is evolving. This process may feel like constant misalignment. Conversations that once flowed now seem forced. Places where you used to feel comfortable now seem strange. It's as if the world is changing, but in reality, you are the one changing. The frequency at which your being vibrates is no longer the same, and everything around you responds to this change. Sometimes subtly, sometimes painfully evident. This is a process you can't stop, because it's not something you consciously choose. It's part of your growth, of your preparation for something greater. Your energy, that invisible force that defines how you interact with the world, is being refined. It's as if the universe is tuning an instrument, adjusting each string so it can produce a clearer sound, more aligned with the melody you're destined to play. Perhaps you wonder why this process doesn't happen easily, why it seems to be accompanied by so much confusion, so much pain. The truth is, transformation is never comfortable. You can't become something new without leaving behind what you were, and that shedding isn't easy. It's like a snake shedding its skin. It doesn't do it because it wants to, but because it has to. The old skin can no longer sustain its growth. Though the process is uncomfortable, it is also inevitable. You are going through your own energetic transformation, leaving behind patterns, relationships, and beliefs that can no longer contain the version of you that is emerging. In this process, it may seem like you are losing more than you are gaining, but what you are truly letting go of is not a loss. It is a liberation. Everything that leaves is because it is no longer aligned with the frequency you are about to hold. It's as if your energy is being filtered, removing impurities, and leaving only what is authentic and essential. While this may seem discouraging, it is also deeply liberating, because what remains after this process is a purer version of yourself, one that is in harmony with the purpose that lies within you. The connections that once gave you stability may now feel like a weight. Not because there is something wrong with those people, but because they no longer resonate with who you are becoming. This doesn't mean you should cut ties or distance yourself from everyone, but it does mean you must be honest with yourself about what you need, what elevates you, and what limits you. Sometimes, the most courageous act you can do is let go of what no longer serves you, even if it hurts, even if it means walking for a time on a solitary path. This energetic shift not only affects how you relate to others, but also how you relate to yourself. The thoughts you once accepted without questioning now challenge you. The emotions you used to suppress now demand recognition. It's as if a light is turned on inside you, revealing parts of yourself that previously stayed in the shadows. And while facing these aspects of yourself may be uncomfortable, it is necessary, because only by seeing these shadows can you integrate them, and only by integrating them can you move forward. It's important to remember that this process has no final destination. It's not something that will end one day forever. It is a constant cycle of transformation that will take you to new heights, only to invite you to transform again. And while this may seem exhausting, it is what makes life so rich, so vibrant. Each time you go through this cycle, you come a little closer to your truth, to the essence that lies at the heart of all that you are. You may wonder how you can navigate this process without feeling lost, how you can move through these changes without getting caught up in them. The answer isn't a fight against what's happening, but to surrender to the flow. Surrendering doesn't mean giving up. It means trusting. trusting that this process, though challenging, is working in your favor, trusting that every step, even the most difficult, is bringing you closer to the person you are meant to be. Think of it like a river flowing toward the ocean. No matter how many rocks it encounters along the way, the water always finds its way forward. You, too, are flowing towards something greater, and though the path may seem uncertain, you can trust that you are being guided. You don't need to have all the answers right now. All you need to do is be willing to take the next step, to allow change to occur, even if you can't see where it's leading you. This energetic change is a reminder that you're not here to stay where you are. You're here to grow, to expand, to become a version of yourself that you can't even imagine right now. And while this process may be solitary, it is also deeply meaningful, because in the solitude, in the space the universe has created for you, you're finding something that can't be found anywhere else, your inner power. When you look back, you will realize that this moment, though difficult, was necessary, that every connection that faded, every relationship that changed, every emotion that arose, was an essential part of your transformation. And you will understand that this energetic shift wasn't something that happened to you, but something you chose, something your soul called for in order to evolve. You don't need to understand everything that is happening now. You don't need to have all the pieces of the puzzle. All you need to do is trust that you are exactly where you need to be, because this change, though challenging, is the way to freedom, to authenticity, to the truth of who you are. And on this path, you will discover that you are not losing anything that truly matters. You are gaining everything that you have always been. There is a moment in the journey of those who are called to something greater when everything seems to stop, not because they are not progressing, but because the things that used to give them direction no longer work in the same way. It's as if the tools they use to navigate their lives have become obsolete, leaving them facing unknown territory they cannot map with the methods of the past. This void, though challenging, is not an obstacle. It is a reminder that they are being prepared for a purpose that transcends the ordinary, a calling that requires total focus. When you are destined for something greater, distractions become a weight you cannot carry with you. Relationships, commitments, and external expectations, though valuable at one time, begin to feel like chains that limit your movement, not because they are inherently bad, but because they no longer align with the path that is unfolding before you. In this space, isolation is not punishment. It is an opportunity. It is like a blank canvas waiting for you to paint on it with the colors of your truth, rather than the strokes others have left in your life. It's easy to resist this process. After all, we all want to feel connected, to be part of something, to have bonds that give us stability. But what happens when those connections begin to deviate you from your mission? What happens when the universe, in its wisdom, intervenes to remind you that your purpose is too great to be shared with those who are not yet ready to walk beside you? This is the moment when many feel lost because they're not seeing what is really happening. You are being released so you can move forward without unnecessary burdens. Think of a ship about to sail into unexplored waters. Before it departs, it must shed everything that is not essential, everything that could slow down the journey. This process may seem wasteful, even painful, because it involves letting go of things that once had value. But it is also an act of preparation, a declaration that you are ready to embark on something that requires all of your focus, all of your energy. This is how isolation operates. Not as a loss, but as an act of refinement. The calling you are responding to is not something small. It is a force that pushes you to step out of your comfort zone, to abandon the structures that kept you safe but also stagnant. It is a reminder that you are not here to live an ordinary life. You are here to make a difference, to create something that transcends your own existence. And that kind of mission cannot be carried out if your energy is scattered in too many directions. Maybe you wonder how you can reconcile this calling with your desire for connection, with that human need to love and be loved. There is no simple answer because the love you are seeking cannot be found in traditional connections. At this point in your journey, love is not an external pursuit. It is an internal state. It is the force that moves you, that holds you, that guides you, even when the path is uncertain. There comes a moment in the life of those destined for something greater when everything begins to transform, not abruptly, but like a tide that gradually removes everything that isn't deeply rooted. Perhaps you felt that your relationships, those connections that once seemed essential, are starting to fade away. It's as if the pieces of the puzzle that you had built in your life are coming undone, leaving you with a void that can't easily be filled. This isolation, though perplexing, is a mistake. It's a design, a space created by the universe for you to reconnect with who you truly are. It's easy to resist this process. How could you not when the relationships that once gave you stability now seem to disintegrate? You might wonder what you've done wrong, why the love, support, or companionship you sought seems to be slipping further away. But here's the truth. This isolation isn't a punishment or a sign that something is broken in you. It's a call, an invitation to pause and listen. Because in the silence of solitude, in the absence of external distractions, is when you can finally hear your own voice. Imagine you are in a room full of people with conversations, laughter, and sounds competing for your attention. It's impossible to hear a whisper amidst all that noise. But when the room empties, when silence takes its place, that whisper, though faint, becomes clear. That whisper is your essence, your deepest truth, the part of you that has always been there but has often been buried under expectations, demands, and the connections you created in the external world. This isolation doesn't pull you away from others. It brings you closer to yourself. Often, we seek in others answers to questions that only we can answer. We try to fill internal voids with the love and company of others, believing that will complete us. But what we're seeking outside of ourselves cannot be found there, because it's not something that's missing. It's something we've forgotten. Isolation, though challenging, is the ground where that remembrance can be reborn, the space where you can reconnect with the wholeness that has always been inside you. This process isn't easy because it involves looking at parts of yourself that you may have avoided in the noise and distraction of daily life. It's easy to ignore what hurts, what's missing, what doesn't fit. But in isolation, you can't escape it. That void you feel isn't the absence of something external. It's a reminder that there's something inside of you that needs to be recognized, embraced, and healed. And that work can only be done when you have the courage to be with yourself, without running away, without seeking answers elsewhere. Perhaps you feel that this isolation is unfair, that you shouldn't be alone, that you should be surrounded by love, support, and deep connections. But what if this space is exactly what you need to grow? What if this moment of solitude is a gift, an opportunity to rediscover who you are without the influences of others? The roots of a tree don't strengthen on the surface. They sink into the darkness, where there is no light or company, because that's where they find the nourishment that will support everything that will grow later. The disconnection from others isn't a rejection, but a redirection. It's as if the universe is saying, stop, look inside. Everything you need is here. In solitude, you don't find immediate answers, but you find the right questions. What part of yourself have you been ignoring? What do you need to release in order to move forward? What truly makes you feel alive and connected, not with the external world, but with yourself? This isolation is a sacred space, though it may not always feel that way. It's a sanctuary where you can strip away the masks you've worn, the expectations you've assumed, and the connections that no longer resonate with who you're meant to be. In this place, you can rediscover your essence, that unique spark that cannot be defined or limited by anything or anyone. And when you find that spark, everything changes, not because the external world transforms, but because you do. It's natural to want to rush this process, to want to get out of isolation as soon as possible. But growth cannot be forced. It's like a flower that cannot bloom before its time. It needs the right space and time to unfold. The same goes for you. This moment isn't a punishment or a pause. It's a preparation. You're being called to something greater. And this isolation is a ground where you are planting the roots you'll need to sustain that growth. In this space, you begin to realize that you're not truly alone. Because while external connections may have faded, your connection with yourself, with your essence, with the universe, has never disappeared. It's in this space where you discover that true companionship doesn't come from others, but from your own presence. And that connection with yourself is a foundation upon which all other authentic connections in your life will be built. Don't fear this process. Don't rush it. Allow yourself to be in this place, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's uncertain, because it's here where you find a clarity that cannot be found anywhere else. It's here where you discover that the love, wholeness, and connection you've always sought outside of you were already within you, waiting to be recognized. When the time comes, the right connections will come back to you. They won't be the same as before, because you won't be the same. They will be connections that reflect your truth, your essence, your growth. But until then, this space is yours. It's a gift, an opportunity, a preparation. And when you look back, you'll realize that this isolation was a detour, but the path that led you to yourself. At times, the change happening within you is so profound that, although you can't see it, you feel that something inside you is shifting. It's not a sudden movement, but like the slow sliding of tectonic plates that, though invisible, has the power to completely alter the surface of your life. This change isn't just emotional or mental, it's energetic. It's a transformation that happens on levels you don't always understand, but that manifests in ways that are impossible to ignore. If you feel that the people around you don't understand you, if the relationships that once gave you meaning now feel heavy, it's because the energy you're carrying is evolving. This process might feel like a constant mismatch. Conversations that once flowed now feel forced. Places where you once felt comfortable now feel foreign. It's like the world is changing, but in reality, you are the one changing. The frequency at which your being vibrates is no longer the same, and everything around you responds to this change. Sometimes subtly, sometimes painfully, obviously. It's a process you can't stop because it's not something you consciously choose. It's part of your growth, your preparation for something greater. Your energy, that invisible force that defines how you interact with the world, is being refined. It's as if the universe is tuning an instrument, adjusting each string so it can produce a clearer sound, more aligned with the melody you're meant to play. Perhaps you've wondered why this process doesn't happen smoothly, why it seems accompanied by so much confusion and pain. The truth is, transformation is never comfortable. You can't become something new without leaving behind what you were, and that letting go isn't easy. It's like a snake shedding its skin. It doesn't do it because it wants to, but because it must. The old skin can no longer support its growth. This is not a linear process. There will be days when you feel completely at peace with these transitions, and other days when loneliness seems unbearable. But in both cases, you are progressing because every step you take toward your authenticity is a step toward a fuller, freer life, one that is more aligned with what truly matters. And that life does not depend on how many connections you have, but on how authentic they are. When relationships change, it's easy to fall into the temptation of blaming yourself or others. But this process is not about blame. It's about growth. It's about learning to let go of what no longer aligns with you. Not because there's something wrong with it, but because you are evolving into something greater. And that growth, though challenging, is the greatest gift you can give yourself. Right now, it may seem like you're losing more than you're gaining, but when you look back, you'll realize that every connection that faded, every relationship that changed, and every moment of solitude was an essential piece of your transformation. You weren't being rejected. You were being liberated. And in that liberation, you found the space to grow, to bloom, and become who you're destined to be. You don't need this process. You don't need to seek connections to fill the void. All you need is to trust that this dissonance, though uncomfortable, is part of a larger plan, a plan guided by your own energy, your own truth. Because when you finally find connections that are meant for you, they won't come from necessity or chance. They will be the reflection of the person you become, of the energy you now carry, of the authenticity you've claimed as your own. This is a gift of dissonance, a reminder that you are changing, that you are growing, that you are liberating yourself from everything that no longer resonates with you. And although the road may seem uncertain, you can trust that you're being guided towards something much greater. Because this is not the end. It's just the beginning of a new chapter, one in which you're completely aligned with the truth of who you really are. When everything around you seems to fade, you face an unavoidable reality. You are alone with yourself in that space, without external distractions. A fundamental question arises. What remains when everything else is gone? The answer doesn't come immediately, but slowly, you begin to discover something you didn't know had always been there. You, not the version of you that seeks validation, nor the one that molds itself to fit in, but the most authentic and silent version of you, the one that doesn't need words to know it's enough. This isolation isn't a void. It's a meeting, a reconnection with who you are at your essence, beyond the mask you've worn and the expectations you've carried. In the beginning, the silence can be deafening, as if you don't know what to do with so much space. But this silence is not your enemy. It is an ally, inviting you to explore the depths of your being, those parts of you that you've ignored because the noise of the world was always louder. Now, without that noise, you have the opportunity to listen with clarity. In this process, you realize that you've spent much of your life looking outside for what has always been inside. You've sought love, acceptance, and meaning in others, believing they could fill you. But in this space of solitude, you discover that you cannot seek outside what you haven't first found within yourself. The love you're looking for, the connection you crave, cannot come from another if it hasn't been born inside of you first. Because the love you give yourself is the foundation upon which all other relationships are built. It's easy to fall into the trap of believing you need to be completed by someone else. Society has taught you that being alone is a problem to be solved, not a stage to be lived. But this isolation is not a lack. It's a gift. It's the space the universe has given you to learn to be whole on your own, to discover that you don't need anyone else to be enough because you already are. You've always been. Take a moment to reflect. What would you do if you knew, without a doubt, that you are complete just as you are? What decisions would you make if you weren't trying to fill a void, but simply expressing yourself from a place of wholeness? This is the power of learning to be with yourself. It's not a state of perfection, but of acceptance. It's looking at your own shadows and loving them, not because they're beautiful, but because they are yours. It's recognizing that you don't need to be anything other than what you already are. This is not an easy process. It requires courage. It requires sitting with your own thoughts, your own fears, without escaping, without seeking distractions. But in that act of courage, you find something that no external connection can give you: peace. Not the peace that comes from everything being in place, but the peace that arises from knowing that you could be okay, even when things are not. Because true peace is not the absence of chaos, but the presence of trust in yourself. There's immense power in this discovery. When you learn to be whole by yourself, you stop seeking in others what you've already found within. Your relationships change because they're no longer a need, but a choice. You no longer seek someone to save you, validate you, or make you feel loved, because that love you already have. This doesn't mean you give up on connections, but that you approach them from a place of freedom. You are not with someone because you need them, but because you choose them. This change not only transforms how you relate to others, but also how you relate to yourself. You begin to see yourself differently. The criticisms you once accepted lose their strength. The impossible standards you once imposed begin to crumble. Not because you stopped trying, but because you recognize that you don't need to be perfect to be worthy of love and acceptance. That dignity doesn't come from the outside. It's something that has always been inside of you, waiting to be recognized. In this space, you begin to understand that solitude is not something to be avoided, but something to be embraced. Because in solitude, you find clarity. You find the strength to let go of what no longer serves you, and the wisdom to open yourself to what truly matters. This process doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey, one that requires patience and compassion toward yourself. But every step you take brings you closer to the truth of who you are. There is no final destination on this path. You will always be learning, growing, evolving. But at every stage, you find something new, something that reminds you that you are stronger, more resilient, and more whole than you believed. And that strength doesn't come from others. It comes from within. It is a result of having faced yourself and come out the other side with a deeper understanding of what it really means to be you. When you reach this point, you will realize that the isolation was not a punishment, but a preparation. Every moment of solitude, every night when you felt lost, was a necessary step to bring you to where you are now. From this point, you can look ahead with renewed confidence. Not because you have all the answers, but because you have come to understand that no matter what happens, you can trust yourself to find the way. This is not the end of your journey, but rather a turning point. It is the moment when you stop searching outside for what has always been within you. It is a realization that you do not need anyone else to complete you because you are already whole. And from this place of wholeness, You can begin to build a life that is not only rich in external connections, but also deeply rooted in the most significant connection of all, the one you have with yourself. The love you discover in this process is neither fleeting nor conditional. It is a love that endures, a love that does not rely on circumstances or the approval of others. It is a love that sustains you, propels you, and guides you. And from this love, you can face any challenge because you know that, in your essence, you are enough, not because someone else told you, but because you have discovered it for yourself. The path of those who are called to something greater has never been easy. As you move forward, you realize that isolation, that space that initially felt empty, is just a phase in a process that has always been designed to protect you. Deep within you, there is a spark that cannot be extinguished, a light that the universe knows must be cultivated before it is shared. This isolation is not a separation. It is a sanctuary, a place where you can strengthen yourself, where you can integrate every part of you before emerging into the world as the most authentic version of who you truly are. Transformation does not happen in the midst of noise. It requires stillness, a space where you can face yourself without the distractions of the outside world. And in that space, the universe protects you, not because it doubts your ability, but because it understands that everything has its time. Right now, your time is one preparation. You do not need to resist this process. You do not need to rush it. You only need to trust that this journey has a purpose, even when you cannot yet see it clearly. Sometimes, isolation feels like a test, as if the universe is challenging you to prove your strength. But it is not a test. It is an act of love. It is the universe whispering that you need this time to grow, to heal, to become the person you are meant to be. You cannot bring light to others if you have not first learned to sustain it within your own darkness. And this space, this apparent emptiness, is where you learn to do just that. When you look up at a clear night sky, you see stars that seem distant from one another. But what you do not see is the invisible web that connects them, the energy flowing between them, holding them in balance. This is how this process works. Even if you feel disconnected, you are not alone. You are being upheld by something greater, something you may not always be able to explain, but that you can always feel. That connection does not disappear, even in the darkest moments. It has always been there, and it always will be. Isolation is not the end of your path. It is just a chapter, one that is necessary for you to integrate every change, every lesson, every part of yourself that is emerging. When the universe pulls you away, it is not so that you get lost, but so that you may find yourself. It is a reminder that before you can share your light with the world, you must first learn to sustain it within yourself. Because that light is not found outside, it has always been within you, waiting for you to be still long enough to recognize it. Ask yourself this: what is it that you truly want to bring to the world? Is it something born from a place of lack, from a need for validation? Or is it something that arises from the depths of your being, from that part of you that knows you have something unique to offer? This isolation is your opportunity to discover the answer. It is a time to release what no longer belongs to you, to let go of expectations, demands, and external voices that have tried to define who you are. It is a time to remember that you, just as you are, have always been enough. You cannot force this process. Transformation does not follow a schedule. It is like the sunrise. You cannot make it appear faster, but when it finally arrives, it illuminates everything around it. This is how it happens with you. Every day in the space of apparent solitude is a preparation, a gathering of light that will eventually radiate in ways you cannot yet imagine. You may be wondering when all of this will end, when you will finally cross to the other side. But here is the truth: there is no other side. There is no fixed endpoint to this journey. What exists is an ongoing unfolding, a series of moments that invite you to deepen, to grow, to discover more about who you are and what you are capable of. This is not a destination you will reach someday. It is a process you are living right now. When you finally emerge from this space, you will not be the same. Something within you will have changed, something that others will notice, even if they cannot quite put it into words. It will not be a superficial shift, but something deeper, a calmness, a clarity, a strength that remains unshaken by external storms. That strength does not come from what you have achieved, but from the inner work you have done in this space. It is a result of having faced yourself, of having walked through solitude, and having found your own center. The connections you have been waiting for have not been lost. They have simply been waiting for the right moment to manifest. And when they do, they will not be like those you had before. They will be more genuine, more aligned with who you are now. They will not be relationships based on need, but on freedom. They will not be defined by what you can gain, but by what you can share. And that is what makes this process worthwhile. Not because it takes you to a specific place, but because it transforms you into someone who can walk this path with purpose and clarity. So, isolation is not an obstacle. It is a bridge. It is not a pause, it is a rebirth. It is a reminder that, even in your most solitary moments, you are being guided, protected, and upheld by something greater. And that something is not outside of you. It is a part of you. It is a connection you have always had with the universe. That current of energy that flows through everything, reminding you that you are never truly alone. You do not need to know what the future will look like. You do not need to have all the answers right now. The only thing you need is to trust in this moment, in this space, in this process, because this is where the magic happens, where transformation takes shape, where the light within you begins to shine brighter than ever before. And when the time comes, you will be ready, not because you have reached a destination, but because you have learned to walk your own path with a certainty that everything you need has always been within you.